Hey, what is going on, everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7 Out today. Got a little discussion video for you guys. Unfortunately, we're not going to be jumping into some matches today. However, hey, don't click away yet, because we're going to be discussing some pretty big patch notes that just dropped pertaining to the new RTA season. And that's right, the warfare rules that we had for the last season are going to change. And if you need a refresher on the warfare rules from last season, if you're ranked champion or higher, these will start applying to your matches. The offense rule increased defense penetration of warrior heroes by 20%. Defense increased penetration resistance of everybody on both sides by 30%. Weakening increases burn and bleed damage by 50%, and resistance increases effect resistance by 100%. Now, a lot of you guys have actually been asking me about my opinions after playing with a full season of these rules, of what do I think about these four in particular, right? And we'll get to that in just a second. What I actually want to touch on first is this. The spring season is going to be beginning very shortly. And we will be getting an ML Polita skin for this season. We don't know what it looks like yet. All that stuff is going to be coming out as the season progresses, right? That information. So the spring 2026 season, what does it come with? It comes with a few adjustments, right? Of course, we're going to get a new entry banner, a new lobby, a new background. But the main thing that we're going to see is that your warfare rules are going to change. New warfare rules will be applied to the World Arena Spring 2026 season, and they'll provide more details on the updated rules in the Fall 2025 season infographic, which they say will be released separately in a dev notes section. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to speculate what these new rules will be. And if you want me to review the official documentation with the infographic and you want a full breakdown of that, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to do something like that with you guys if you're interested. Going back to the warfare rules, right? The ones that we had for the last season actually kind of grew on me, right? And here's the reason why. I did ask you guys in the comment section of various videos to give me your opinions on what these warfare rules were like for you and what you would like to see moving forward. A lot of people actually talked about the resistance rule, where you actually wanted one for effectiveness as well, right? And some other people were just speculating like, hey, for offense, instead of limiting it to just warrior heroes, could we just do like increased penetration, like defense penetration across all heroes by 30%, right? It doesn't impact the units that already do 100% penetration, but it might help some, you know, weaker DPS units actually do some decent damage every once in a while. And that's pretty interesting. And a lot of you guys basically said nothing about the burn and bleed, because there's really nothing to talk about there, right? So let's go ahead and start with breaking down the offense, right? Offense for the rules, increased defense penetration of warrior heroes by 20%. And why warriors specifically, right? Warriors are generally really strong, really resilient, bruisery units, and they're quite tanky, right? I'm just scrolling through a bunch of my warriors here, and some are built, some are not. But you can see they're generally pretty decently bulky, right? Some have immortality and other ways to protect themselves here. A lot of them are on counter sets, right? Destruction sets, so they do pack quite a punch. So I think they chose warriors because warriors are, even though they have some of the best artifacts, honestly, out of all the units in the game, they do kind of lack a bit of like oomph, a little extra, right, that they bring to the table. You'll normally see like a select few units being used, right, prior to the recent bust with APOC Ravi and everything, and since we haven't been able to test them really in an RTA season, you had like Lionheart Surmia, Bystander Huayang, Disciplinary Prefect Arya, and maybe like Mediator Cowrick, Urban Shadow Shu like popped up here and there sometimes. Aside from that, like Amiki was okay-ish last season, like in certain circumstances. That was pretty much it. There were almost like no really good consistently drafted warriors across the board, right? I use Bystander Huayang personally quite often. But aside from that, Designer Lilibet, not really seen all that much, right? Lone Crescent Bologna, not a really common DPS anymore since ML Landy's not here. You just really didn't have that many options to go for, yeah? And I think that's really the key. I don't know if we want to increase defense penetration for everybody, because when it comes to certain knights, they already carry a bunch of fixed damage, right? Giving units extra defense penetration on top of fixed damage artifacts and such might not be a great idea, and we see how powerful units like Genesis Raz with his defense penetration on his skill 3 already is. So giving more units more defense penetration, like with knights, they're super hard to defeat, is a little tricky in terms of balance. Thieves are actually quite common, I would say. Setsuka played a huge part in the last season, right? We did see some Tori pop up here and there. You have a lot of cleavers like Argent Wave Hua Young, like Ron, even things like Celine, for example, right? You did see pop up quite a bit. Rinok was absolutely everywhere. Spirit Eye Celine just dominated the scene last season. It was her season after all. She got this beautiful skin. And then you also had things like BBK, right? So there's a lot of thieves that are floating around out there, and a lot of them actually deal quite a bit of damage. So giving penetration across the board to all classes, it kind of seems like a little much. And I do get the argument that, you'll be bolstering weaker units, but at the same time, bolstering weaker units also bolsters the units that are already good, and so no one's going to no one's going to go out of their way to pick a weaker thief unit, like Says, for example, when you can just go for BBK and essentially like get the same job done, right? You just want to nuke absolutely everything. So why would you go for a weaker option if both of them get penetration? So it is a little tricky to balance in that regard, right? When it comes to Rangers, a lot of them are openers, a lot of them are support units, but you do have some DPSs like Afternoon Soak Flan, like Eligos. You see like 300 plus speed Eligoses that are running around. They're pretty scary, yeah. But aside from that, there are not too many Rangers that are really DPSs, so it wouldn't really hurt to see, Rangers get defense penetration, but at the same time, it doesn't really change anything, right? I think Warriors was a pretty good choice because it was pretty impactful. When it comes to mages, guys, oh my god, you really want to give mages more? Defense penetration increase on mages would be insane, not only because you have cleave units like Politis, for example, but you also have insane damage from Fern and Freerin, who was definitely dominant in the meta last season, right? We'll see what she's like in the upcoming season there too. And you do have, you have like Ball and Cezanne, who got a buff and is actually pretty decent now, but he already has penetration in his kit. But you're also looking at the likes of Harsetti getting penetration. Kind of scary. Zio, for example, Requiem Rowana, if you build a DPS version of her. There's just a lot of potential here, and like ML Ludwig, right? There's a top model Luluka. Those are all units that I actually don't have that can also benefit quite a bit from penetration across the board. So yeah, when it comes to choosing the warfare rules for offensive capabilities, I can see why they honestly stuck with Warriors. It did make quite a bit of sense, actually, when I started playing, because the season, and yeah, I would like to see it get expanded, maybe give another class some time to shine. I hope that they, by changes to the rules, I hope they mean like they overhaul all 4 of them, and then just swap them out for something new. But yeah, I do like the Warrior one. I think it was pretty decent. Was it my favorite one? Not really, actually. Let's go back to check the list here. When it comes to the other ones here, right? Defense, weakening, and resistance. Resistance was actually my favorite one by far. So let's talk about resistance next, actually. Let's go out of order here. Resistance was really cool because the balance between effectiveness and resistance in this game is honestly kind of broken, right? It's so easy to get super high effectiveness on your units, 200 effectiveness, 200 effectiveness, right? Almost 200 here. Knockwall's 180. This with no imprints. With imprints, it's easily over 200. Assyria with a few more imprints would be very close to 200, and I'm missing a boot too, so she's normally over 200. Even this Dragon King Sharoon randomly here has like 175 plus 20 something something. So we're at like 100 effectiveness, okay? Swift Flagbearer Sigret with an artifact here giving more effectiveness is essentially effectively, no pun intended, at 200 effectiveness. Now, effectiveness and resistance has an interesting relationship in the game, because if you have like no effectiveness and no resistance, right? Your opponent, if they have 0 effectiveness and 0 resistance, will always be able to debuff you 100% of the time, bar 15%. There's always a 15% chance in this game that debuffs don't land, right? Negative effects don't land. So when it comes to this, effectiveness essentially has a 100% advantage over effect resistance. In order for you to guarantee that you cannot get debuffed by your opponent, right? In order to just guarantee that you cannot, you need to have 100 effect resistance. So if I can even find a unit, there we go, Aram. Aram has 100 effect resistance. So in this case, if my opponent has a unit that has 0 effectiveness, absolutely no effectiveness whatsoever, I will be able to resist them 100% of the time, okay? If they had 50% effectiveness, I'd be able to resist them half the time, right? Because 100 minus 50 is 50%, and 50% chance is the chance that they have to land a debuff on me now. This is really imbalanced because all your opponent has to do is build a unit that has some effectiveness, a little bit, not even a whole ton. I'm not even talking 300 or something like that. Let's take my Researcher Carrot, for example. She has 100 effectiveness, right? With 100 effectiveness, in order for my opponent to 100% of the time resist every single debuff that she can put out here, they need 200 effect resistance. They need double the stat rolls that I have in terms of effectiveness, right? They need double. And that is really difficult to do. Is it possible? Yes, it is very much possible. You can see when I sort by effect res, and if I self-imprint the Acades over here, for example, my Infinite Horizon Acades is over 300 effect resistance, plus her artifact. There are artifacts that increase effect resistance, right? Don't get me wrong here. I'm not trying to be biased or anything, but look at the stats that I sacrificed. My bulk, not great. Could easily get one shot by any unit that penetrates defense, for example. Her speed, also not great. She's just a unique case where she actually gains some combat readiness here with her skill 3 every time someone's turn ends, but that's not the case for most people, right? Even taking a look at my Lady of the Scales, for example, right? Very, very frail. She can afford it because of her damage sharing effects, right? But then let's just take a look at the normal resist units. Fire Politis, I used a few times last season. Bellion, I used quite a bit. Even my MLK Ron, which I used quite a bit last season. 200 effect resistance, right? My opponent, if they had 150 effectiveness, which is a really common threshold for people to build effectiveness for, you can see a lot of my units, look, even my Senya randomly sitting at 150 effectiveness, 150, about 150, right? Units that sit around 150 effectiveness still have a 50% chance of debuffing. So that's why you'll easily see when I'm in a fight and Bellion is there, Bellion gets debuffed. Debuffs will land on her. She's not immune. Now, I do end up stacking like effect res imprints for the team, or I'll bring along artifacts like Bastion of Hope for extra effect resistance, but it's just the fact that you can only build resistance on certain units. Like Bellion doesn't, I'm giving up all my crit rate and crit damage for this build, 0 speed, just to get some bulk and resistance, right? It's very difficult to balance effectiveness and effect res in that way, but because effectiveness always has that 100% advantage, I think it's justified that that effectiveness doesn't get the extra 100%, right? And that resistance gets it instead. It allows people to essentially like tank through debuffs. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. Is like to guarantee immunity against debuffs, right? With certain team compositions. If you have like an ML Arya on your side giving effect res, right? You're building a bunch of 200 effect res units. You're still going out of your way to very like specialize your character's builds around this to benefit from it, right? Whereas effectiveness getting 100% increase would honestly kind of make any unit, like, it'll just make resistance useless, right? You would never build a 300 resist Acades. The reason I do this, by the way, is because if anyone builds a 200 effectiveness unit, they can't debuff her. the funny thing is, my Infinite Horizon Acades has been debuffed quite a few times, and this is without Warfare rules, right? Just 300 effect res here. You can easily find Rowanas, Silverblade Araminthas that have such insane effectiveness, right? Silverblade Araminta is another one that people build up to 300 effectiveness for, just for these high resist units. So effectiveness essentially always wins because it always has an advantage, and that's why, again, I just don't think it needs that buff. Moving on from that, let's go ahead and talk about defense penetration resistance, which honestly, in my opinion, was my most hated one. Penetration resistance by 30% is essentially giving everyone an Empyrean Ilanov on your team, right? Empyrean Ilanov, her passive, if you weren't aware, increases penetration resistance of all allies by 30%. So now imagine everybody, always, at all times, like, you can't seal this passive, you can't get rid of it. Everyone has penetration resistance, and this stacks with things like Empyrean Ilanov, for example. This will stack with other damage mitigation stuff that you have on your team, like an Aureus on a Knight, right? For example, if I had Aureus and defense penetration resistance, like, this will make teams so bulky, it's insane. A lot of characters also have passives, like Little Queen Charlotte reduces the amount of damage that people take by 20%, right, on her team. You have units like Archdemon herself that have a passive that says when suffering critical hit, reduces damage by 30%. A lot of these units have hidden damage reduction in them, and so they become incredibly difficult to kill. Their effective HP is insane, right? It'll take so many more hits, and also all these units that rely on defense penetration, for example, right? Little Queen Charlotte, let's go back to her. She penetrates defense by 50% when she attacks with her skill 3. That is a lot of damage that you're missing out, because when these characters get their multipliers are all based on them having this defense penetration, right? They're not just going to do insane raw damage, because otherwise, when they penetrate defense, their damage is going to be incredibly insane, right? You're essentially cleaving with a skill that you shouldn't be able to cleave with. And so penetration is here to kind of balance that, right? You have lower damage, raw damage, and then penetration will increase the amount of damage that you do because you're ignoring your opponent's defense. And there are ways around that. Of course, you have Empyrean Ilanov, for example. You do have DN. There are not too many ways to stop penetration right now in the game, but DN also has a 3-turn increased penetration resist buff. Keep in mind it's a buff, so it can be stripped, so it's a little unfortunate. And you're starting to see some units like APOC Robbie's recent buff get this penetration resistance as well, right? Penetration resist increased by 30%. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I just don't like it across the board, because then it limits you to a lot of things that you can't use. And I'm not saying like, oh, you know, warfare rules limiting me in how I can play, sucks. It's not really what I'm getting at here. I know they're supposed to try to limit you, but I think they limit a ton of options, like way too many options, and I would like to see that a bit narrowed down. I don't exactly know how I want to see it narrowed down, but just, you know, for example, like Midnight God Lilius, she was neutered when Empyrean Ilanov existed, and this unit will basically never be good again until defense penetration somehow goes away, which it won't. Yeah, so just as an example, right? Midnight God Lilius, there's so many units, defense penetration so ingrained into our units, right? Genesis Roz gets affected, Last Rider Crown, Navy Captain Landy, right? All these DPS options, and I don't know, I felt like it was just really annoying to play around it, and you had to use, you basically, when that was up, you had to use units that didn't penetrate defense that also did a lot of damage. And let me tell you, there's not many of those units, so what you got was absolute slugfests of matches where people were using fixed damage against each other. You had like 30k HP, you know, Boss of Runkas with Empyrean Ilanov sitting there as well, and you just couldn't do anything, right? Yeah, 34, like mine's a 34k HP Empyrean Ilanov. I've seen like a 38k HP Empyrean Ilanov. I've seen like crazy builds out there of people just sitting and tanking down, and as a person who kind of plays slower and tanks down myself in the last season, it was just really annoying. I did not like it. It was my least favorite warfare rule by far. And yeah, I don't know what else I can say about it besides I would like to see it kind of narrowed. So instead of everybody getting this penetration resistance, maybe like Soul Weavers. Maybe we want to encourage more Soul Weaver plays, right? You can build your Soul Weavers, maybe take away the resistance rule, but give penetration resist to Soul Weaver so that they get to survive more, right? And then you can build more of your stats into resistance or something of that sort. The last thing here is the weakening rules, right? So increasing burn and bleed damage by 50% was worthless. Honestly, they could have just applied that to every match and it still would have been fine. Most units that have like burns and bleeds aren't applying it super consistently. If we go to debuffs here, let me just search by like bleed, for example. Okay, Firelytica had some bleed. Robin had mostly burns. You're not really using Robin. Nurse Yoha was released after the RTA season ended, and that was, I mean, like Tempest Urn got buffed, yeah, but aside from that, guys, there's pretty much no one that uses bleed. Right now, let's go ahead and look at some burns, okay? When it comes to burns, Holiday Yuffie was a counter to Firelytica at one point, that's why she's built here. But Robin was occasionally used. Occasionally, if you had 2 extra turn units, she was not a bad DPS to bring. Carrot was only recently buffed, she doesn't count. Silverblade Armintha was definitely good in some cases, right? The burn frenzy definitely helped her. Infernal Kawazu didn't really see any impact. Pirate Captain Flaw, not really, she's more of a bomb unit. Archdemon never really got her S3 up, and guys, you want to see some burn units? there's pretty much nobody else. There was pretty much just nobody else. Yeah, so burn and bleed was almost worthless, save for like a couple like characters. Oh yeah, that's right. The new Shuri, Westwind Executioner Shuri, was actually used by a few players. I think I have one, but I never actually built mine. Yes, there he is. So he actually was used at some point, but that's because he just detonated burn effects and it was insane amounts of damage, right? He also just had free stats from effectiveness and such, and he was a decent support unit. Plus the fact that he is a team speed imprint made him very common in more aggressive teams, right? But aside from that, burn and bleed, it sucks, guys. I hope this goes away, and I hope it just never comes back. Now, when it comes to replacing these warfare rules, right? Replacing these 4 rules, what would we like to see? I would like to know what you guys think still in the comments down below, now that I've given you my opinions on the previous season, right? What I am looking forward to is something a bit more specific, right? So I really want to see class-based stuff. I think the class-based ones are okay. The penetration of warrior heroes was not bad. I would like to see perhaps, I know they're trying to kill evasion, but for example, not saying I want to see it immediately next season, in the future they could do something like, hey, all thief units get 30% extra evasion, right? It's like a Setsuka passive. It makes it super annoying, but Setsuka applies it to everyone on the team. This is only for thieves. So hey, maybe you can use a Remnant Violet now and not get dumpstered on for free all the time, right? You have 50% innate evasion, you have 20% from an artifact, 30% here. So unless your opponent is drafting extra hit units, which we have plenty of now, right? Especially with the new buffs and stuff that came with Zahak and such, I think we have enough counters that this wouldn't be too big of an issue, but it'd just be kind of nice to see. That would be kind of cool. Another thing to see is, again, like I mentioned with Soul Weavers earlier, maybe giving Soul Weavers an extra boost in health or defense, or maybe they get a boost in the penetration resistance, right? Instead of everybody getting it, Soul Weavers get it, and we get to see them perhaps shine a little bit more. I know, we just came back from a revive meta. I know everyone's triggered by like the... where is it go? There you go. May Chloe, Ruel, right? Everyone's sick of these units with the Spirit Eye Celine reviving as well. It's just disgusting. I know. I don't like it myself either. We also have Nurse Yoha who just joined the mix not too long ago, right? So perhaps a warfare rule would be that there's something to do with extinction, right? Maybe on kill the units will just be extinct, and that can help. In some regard. Again, not sure, that seems a little too specific, honestly, and I don't want to just counter certain playstyles as well with the warfare rules, but do I also want to give them all free stats? I don't know, right? I don't know if you want to give a Ruel 20% extra HP, because if mine's a 20k HP Ruel and I'm giving it 20% more HP, that's like 4,000 more HP. That's insane. This Ruel would be like over 25k health, right? That's not fun to fight. Some of you guys were talking about more aggressive things. I think you can definitely do stuff that's a bit more aggressive with mages, perhaps. Perhaps giving mages, I know they've done this in the past with frenzy rules, but giving like flat 10 speed increase. I don't know if that's a really terrible thing to do. I don't know if that's awful. But maybe giving mages some extra attack, right? Maybe getting some extra damage. Maybe penetration just for mages. I don't know. It might encourage a lot of shenanigans, but that's kind of what you want sometimes, right? Maybe you'll see Melissa's come back. Maybe you'll see Millim's come back, right? There's a chance. There's a shot. When it comes to effectiveness increases, it would be cool that if, like, Rangers, for example, maybe got, like, an effectiveness increase. I know since a lot of you guys were talking about wanting effectiveness, Rangers getting it might be okay, because a lot of them are debuffers, like Fire Litica and such, and, you know, with units like Fire Litica and things, you do have the ignore resistance, though, for your soul burns. So perhaps if we're going down the line of copying a Setsuka effect, or maybe copying Empyrean Ilanov's effect, maybe a Bellion effect, where you can't soul burn, like neither player can soul burn, it's just a flat roll. Like with Bellion, the player who has Bellion can still soul burn, right? But if you make it blanket so that nobody can soul burn, and everyone knows at the start of the match, that would kind of hinder mages a little bit, right? It would change the way you play. For example, if you chose Ron to counter Lady of the Scales, you can't soul burn this S3 to get Frostbite and Restrict anymore, right? You have to build a ton of effectiveness on your Ron now. So that might actually be interesting. I think that's my favorite one so far, is something like a Bellion effect to restrict soul burns. There's so many ignore effect res soul burns out there that it's kind of ridiculous, right? And that could potentially replace the them getting rid of effect resistance as a warfare rule mechanic. Yeah, I just don't want to see effectiveness blanket across the board for everybody, because then I think honestly people are just not going to build effect resistance at all. They're just going to forego it and be like, whatever, there's no way I'm going to tank stuff anyway, like I'm not going to be able to be immune to debuffs, so I'm just going to allocate those stats elsewhere. And then it just makes debuffs just way too strong, I think. But again, we'll see. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, though. Those are just some ideas, some categories, some general thoughts that I have. I really tried my best over the last few weeks to think about like what super specific warfare rules I want. And I don't think we have enough to work with, guys. I would like to see another season of what Smilegate determines is a decent set of warfare rules before I come to create any of them myself. Because the best way to see how they work is to see them in action, right? So with that being said, though, guys, thank you so much for watching. Do leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. And I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.